History is such an important subject. For us to understand where we come from, it's a mirror in which I think we identify ourselves as a nation, as a people, as a civilization. So, as a young boy who was seeing all this, who otherwise did not like history, I wanted to know the truth behind that false portrayal. I strongly believe that a historian should not become a judge, a jury, a prosecutioner for characters of the past. A historian's role is to just illuminate the archive, bring documents to on record for the consumption of the public. Unfortunately, I think history has been so weaponized, particularly by politicians of all hues. Ironically, after the formation of the ICHR, a certain group, largely, JNU and Aligarh, and these became the Gad, so to say, bastions of what history needs to be. I had a movie on Savarkar, which couldn't have been thought of maybe 35 years ago. That's another issue with the way Indian history is taught, the freedom movement. We are almost made to believe that it was a very simplistic, linear, non-violent movement. Sorry, we were not given freedom, we snatched it from them.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Statesman Talk with me, Deepti J. Verma. Today we are being joined by Dr. Vikram Sampath, who's a renowned historian as well as author. His books have done exceptionally well in recent times and have also met with some controversy. Vikram, first tell our audience, what is the job of a historian? How did you become one? Because I believe you studied engineering first and then you moved to history. Why is the subject so close to your heart and what does a historian do?
Yeah. Thank you, Deepti. Such a pleasure to meet you and to
Thank
be
you
on the
for being here.
podcast. Thanks for the invite. I became a historian serendipitously. I think it was such a happy accident that happened in life. To be very honest, while I was growing up as a student, the one subject I hated in school was history.
Really?
It was taught in such an insipid and a listless manner. You just rote learning, who succeeded whom, which king fought which war, which was extraneous details which mean nothing to a student who's growing up. Unfortunately, though history is such an important subject, for us to understand where we come from, it's a mirror in which I think we identify ourselves as a nation, as a people, as a civilization. So around that time, when I was 12 or 13 years old, there was a very interesting serial that was coming on the only channel that all of us saw those days, which was Doordarshan.
Yeah.
This was in the 90s, just so that no one thinks I'm a very old fossil. So in that, there was a serial, The Sword of Tipu Sultan, which was very popular and produced by Sanjay Khan, who played the lead role. But if you remember, in that the Mysore royal family of the Wadiyars, they were shown in a very, very poor light. Now, Hyder Ali and his son Tipu Sultan were actually usurpers of the throne of Mysore from the Hindu dynasty, which ruled from 1399. Unending rule for 600 years, except these 40 years of an interregnum or an intermission where their rule was captured by this father and son duo. Just 40 years is all that they ruled. About this, the Maharaja in the serial was shown like this obese retard who was dancing with the court dancer, and the Maharani, the Maharani was shown like this one typical Ekta Kapoor serial vamps, evil woman conspiring, conniving. And I live in Bangalore, and in various parts of Karnataka, where today, even after 75 years of the royal family ceasing to exist, people actually hold the Wadiyar dynasty in a lot of regard and reverence. In fact, the scion of the family is also just now become the MP from Mysore and Coorg, Yaduvir Wadiyar. So there was a lot of protest then. There was also a fire that broke out in the premier studios where Sanjay Khan was recording this. And a lot of Kannada media started these vague, assertions that it is a curse of the Wadiyar, because of which this happened, and he burnt his face and all that. So as a young boy who was seeing all this, who otherwise did not like history, I don't know what happened in me that I wanted to know the truth behind that false portrayal. It was
So this was happening in real time.
In real time.
The reaction to the show in Bangalore was not like, and we all watched it back then. So
it probably didn't make much resonance with the rest of India, but in Karnataka, since they had that umbilical
Connection
cord and
with
the
the-
connection with the Wadiyar dynasty, and I had nothing to do with Mysore. I'm half Tamilian and half Maharashtrian, so there was, I don't know what happened. Some things I think destiny chooses you to do. And so I just went to Mysore with my parents, and it became a family project of sorts. And my maternal grandmother. So we met, archivists, historians, members of the royal family, never with the intention that this will become a book or I'll become a historian or anything that time. It was just the joys of discovery of a young teenager who wanted to know the truth. And I would put all of this together in a logbook of
So
sorts.
this book has been work in progress since
Yeah,
then.
since then, since the age of
Wow.
12, 13.
Yeah.
So, and over 10 long years, this madness lasted with me. I don't know what was in it. So, right from just that one king and queen, the interest soon expanded into the entire dynasty of,
Yeah.
with 600 years that I mentioned. And at the end of it, I realized that there was not a single book that was written on this dynasty. Our history is so Delhi centric. And
Yeah.
I'm saying this sitting in the heart
Yeah.
of Delhi,
Yeah.
that unfortunately, vast swathes of land of this nation, they don't find a feature in the larger rubric of what Indian history is. Whether it's the south of India, the northeast, all these don't feature at all. So there's a very famous quote attributed to Toni Morrison who says, if there is a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, then you must be the first one to write it.
Yeah.
So that is how, quite serendipitously, the splendors of Royal Mysore, the untold story of the Wadeyars, it was untold because nobody bothered to tell it, came out in 2008. And by then I'd finished my engineering in electronics, my master's in mathematics, and MBA in finance, and was working in the corporate sector. I thought this was a one book
Math,
wonder.
science, commerce, and now arts.
So I thought this was a one book wonder, and I'll go back to calculating profit and loss of some American company. But thankfully, again, destiny had other plans. So after this book came out, and the book that came immediately after that, called My Name is Gauhar Jan, The Life and Times of a Musician, that really changed my life. And I got an opportunity to pursue a PhD in history at the University of Queensland in Australia. And then there was no looking back. It was I feel so grateful that there are very few people in this world for whom their passion can become their profession. And I'm one such chosen person. So there's just immense gratitude for that. And a historian's job, what you asked, I strongly believe that a historian should not become a judge, a jury, a prosecutioner for characters of the past. In all my books, I try to ensure that we don't judge people of the past with yardsticks and definitions and standards of today. It has to be, a historian's role is to just illuminate the archive, bring documents to on record for the consumption of the public, and don't infantilize your readers. Let them make up their mind. So I never give a judgment. The usual: was he a hero? Was he a villain? Was he brave?
Is that even possible to do with history, you think?
I think we should let it.
Is it fact based, or you think history, as often is said, that is written by the victors?
That's true.
So how do you reach the truth then?
Yeah, it's a very complicated subject because the past by its very virtue is not here to see.
Yeah, it's not here. Yeah.
And each historian, I think, accesses the past through a plethora
Their
of
own
sources,
prism,
through sources which are available. There is individual prism, your biases, your incapacity. Suppose I'm researching about ancient India and I don't know a word of Sanskrit in which a lot of those texts are written, or Prakrit or Pali and all these languages. Then, you are relying on translations. And something like Vedic Sanskrit, one word can have 10 meanings. And unless you understand, you might be lost in translation.
So in that
literally.
way, is our first duty restoration?
I think it needs to happen simultaneously. In fact, I'm trying to do that right now. I've actually established a foundation called the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, FIHCR. And the idea there is to do exactly this, foster new scholarship in Indian history, which is primary source based. So me as a modern historian may not be able to, learn all those languages. It'll take me a couple of lifetimes. So can I have a multidisciplinary team where a historian is in conversation with a Sanskrit Pandit or an archaeologist, a geologist, a geneticist, and so on, to actually investigate and interrogate themes of the past. And that's what FIHCR is trying to do. So I think it's very necessary that we go back to the basics, see things as they are, because as I said, the sources could be highly compromised over the centuries in a invasion ravaged nation like ours, where over the centuries so much could have been destroyed. There could be exaggeration even in the sources. If a court historian is writing about his king or queen, then there'll be exaggeration there too. The incapacity of the modern historian who's accessing that, their political biases, their ideological biases. So the final filtrate that comes out of so many layers of filtration, the truth could just be a speck of what it is. So I always emphasize that a historian needs to be a very humble person. that I don't know
And
the
his word is
absolute
not the
truth.
gospel truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That there is a possibility of another perspective to it. Some famous American historian had said every work of history is an interim report. It
Yeah.
is just a work in progress. We are all revisiting the past. Now, if everything about the past is already written and cast in stone, then I think we historians will go out of job. So we need to revisit them and with a fresher perspective. So that's why when people ask me my latest book, which is on Tipu Sultan, the story of Mysore's interregnum, they say there's so many books written on Tipu. Of course they are, but then you always revisit it with a newer perspective, a newer dimension. And history, I think, is a constant dialogue between a historian and the
And the
facts
past.
and the
And the
facts that are
facts.
available.
Yeah.
I liken history usually to that poem we all read as children, the Blind Men and the Elephant. So literally the elephant in the room is history, and
Yeah.
all of us historians who are trying to search for that are the blind men. So each blind man is asked to touch a part of the elephant and say, how does the elephant look? One blind man says it touches the trunk. Someone
Yeah.
touches
Yeah.
the body, the tail, and comes up with their perspective.
Yeah.
Now they are all correct, but they're all wrong as well, because the elephant is finally the sum of the parts, which all of them put together. So I think there is a need for multiple perspectives, and that is where I think in India the problem has been too. I think especially post independence, the nourishment of an alternative perspective itself has been snuffed out, because there's been a very hegemonic, monochromatic version, which is the Marxist worldview of looking at history, which has dominated particularly the academic circles. Even in pre-independent India, you had space for a nationalistic school of historiography.
Why is academia so left heavy, and why has it been so tough for anybody with an alternative point of view to penetrate it?
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenon not only in India but
Yeah, all over the
worldwide.
world,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So the capture of, I mean, that goes back to all the various theories of Marxism, where the idea is to create capture the mind first
Yeah.
through the media, through the popular culture, arts, and academia. And
So
so
even if they're not in political power, they
yeah,
are in power all the
system
time.
hamara hai, as they
Yeah,
keep
yeah,
saying.
yeah. Yeah, that's
So
true.
that is the issue. And so, as I said, even before independence, when we were a colonized country, there was space for an alternative narrative. You had a nationalistic school of
Oh, so you
historiography.
think that was a better
Better,
time?
actually. Yeah,
There
actually,
was more voice
there was more
then.
voice for this.
Yeah.
And you had people like historians like Sir Jadunath Sarkar, you had Dr. R.C. Majumdar, Sitaram Goyalji, so many others who used to write. But especially after independence, and particularly post 1970s, ironically after the formation of the ICHR, a certain group, largely JNU and Aligarh, and
Yeah.
these became the Gad, so to say, bastions
Yeah.
of what history needs to be. And I think in the process, at least those time, the political power was also such that those who held any alternative view, they paid very heavy price in terms of their careers being destroyed, promotions not got, fellowships denied. And that's how those days academics work. Today there is no need. I have very consciously shunned any invitations to join an
Any particular
academic
clique, yeah.
institution, because I don't want to bind myself to anything or anybody.
That's
I
true.
ferociously guard my independence, because that there's a lot of joy and a privilege to be that way. You can say what you want, you can do what you want, you can write what you want. Whereas if you're confined and bound within the perimeter of an academy, then it becomes very tough. But and this is possible today because there is
Of
a new
social media?
social media. There are platforms
Yeah.
like this, podcasts, which are so widely seen. Even when my first book came out in 2008, which was about 17-18 years ago, I don't think there was so many platforms for dissemination.
Now, your book is quite fat, this one. Obviously, because you've been almost writing it since you were 12. Do you think that, as we're talking about social media, do you think there is...
My latest book, which is on Tipu Sultan, the story of Mysore's interregnum. I mean, my earlier books to the Savarkar volumes are pretty bulky. This, I think, beats all my records so far. My 10th book has been it's 3 lakh words and 900 pages, of which around 200 is only footnotes and bibliography and so on. No, there is. I mean, I see, and it's very heartening to note that also, a lot of young people are consuming this content.
Yeah.
I think the maximum in my book launches, even the one that just happened in Delhi, a large section of the audience were actually youngsters, college students who'd want to. And the entry point for them are
yeah.
podcasts like yours.
Yeah, so basically you're saying, people like the
Yes.
millennials or post millennials, actually Gen Z and Alpha,
Yeah.
they need to understand Indian history even more because they have
Yes.
absolutely no context.
Correct. And I think that it is happening.
Yeah.
I'm quite optimistic about it, considering like across the country, I keep going on lectures and talks, and the maximum people who I meet are young
Yeah.
people, and it really gives me a sense of hope. Of course, that you can't generalize that everyone is in the process, but I think there is this curiosity, which again social media has, struck in them, that you feel that the forbidden fruit has always been a very attractive fruit, right, since the
Yeah.
time of Adam and Eve. So when someone tells you that, there's so much about your history which you have not been told, or it's been told to you wrong, in a wrong or distorted
And it's
manner.
been used to like it's a
That
political
also-
weapon now.
that also-
So if you want to vote, you also have
That
to go
also-
back in time to maybe understand
Yeah.
your choices today.
Unfortunately, I think history has been so weaponized,
Yeah.
particularly by politicians of all hues. Because as George Orwell had said, he who controls the past controls the future.
That's
So, so our colonial masters understood it.
Yeah.
Our first independent government, and what I would largely call the Nehruvian, era, which is a euphemism for that entire, Nehruvian consensus on how we look at our past. I think they also understood it, that to capture the mind, you need to alter history, and that is a very
So the
important.
cultural colonization
Exactly.
continued.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
What are the most misrepresented facts, events that have happened in recent Indian history?
Not necessarily recent, but I think the
Or
very
in past 100 years, that
the
you
very
think-
narrative itself of what Indian history is. A few examples. I mentioned how it is so Delhi centric.
Yeah.
Now we as students know about the succession lines of Khiljis and Lodhis and Tughlaq, small dynasties which really did not contribute much to this country. But vast parts of the country, the south of India, from where I come from,
Yeah.
I mean the Rashtrakutas, the Shatavahanas, Kadambas, Gangas, Vadiyars,
Nobody's-
Cholas,
yeah.
who
We
ruled for
didn't read
thousands.
about
Yeah,
them,
I
yeah.
mean, and the northeast, I don't know if we can. The Ahoms also in
Yeah.
Assam, they ruled for 600 years. But if you
And
ask
they had some major victory, right?
Battle
once?
of Saraighat,
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you ask any young person, or if I ask you, can you
Yeah.
name 2 Ahom kings for me?
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't know.
It would be very tough. But if I
Yeah.
ask you, tell me
2
the
Mughal kings
Mughal
will-
line,
yeah,
you will
that's
know
true.
all of them.
Yeah.
Though they ruled just for 200 some years, and it was not really such a vast empire till the time of maybe
Or it was
Aurangzeb.
not, or do you think it was not beneficial for Indians in general, or they just
It
was
dep-
like any other rule?
Yeah, it depends, because when at 1000 CE, I think India's the share in the global GDP was
GDP
about
was-
40%,
Yeah.
and by the time of the Mughal time, it had shrunk to 25%. While people say the money was within the country, part of it they were also sending back there, but
Sending back where?
sending back to the Middle East.
Okay.
But the per capita GDP was actually reducing and in the negative even during the heights of the Mughal rule. Of course, that shrunk further by the time of the British. It came to probably 3 or 4%. So there was a steady decline in India's importance and share. And even we talk
Why
about
did that happen? Because weren't they trading enough that time?
The British time, of course. I mean, they were sucking out the life
And
force from
trading,
here,
yeah,
killing local industry,
industry, yeah.
using raw materials from here for their
Manufacturing,
factories
yeah.
there and so
Yeah.
on. Yeah, so that is surely a problem. And I mean, even when the Taj Mahal was built, it's a beautiful structure, no doubt. But at that same time, there was a ravaging famine in the Deccan, and the money from there was actually being siphoned off to actually build this monument. So I don't know, in the entire Mughal era, how many universities were built, how much of learning and education for the common man, what were the welfare measures for the common people, which earlier regimes would have done. That when you say how wasn't it beneficial for the people under Aurangzeb, who was an iconoclast. Some of the most sacred temples were also destroyed, right from Kashi Vishwanath to Mathura to Somnath and so many other places. So the manner in which our historiography is, put forth, especially after independence, is somehow don't talk about these uncomfortable truths. Don't talk about destruction.
Don't right the wrongs of the past, kind of thing.
Not even right the wrongs, but at least just state it.
Yeah. At least
Itihas.
accept it that it
Yeah,
happened.
yeah.
Yeah.
So itihas, Sanskrit word for history, it actually literally translates to "it thus happened."
Yeah.
You know,
So it's
you can't.
fact, not
It is,
opinion.
yeah. I mean, you can't wish away your past, or you make up something or extrapolate it for retrofit it for today's political compulsions.
Yeah,
If it happened like that, you need to tell it.
Yeah.
So, but
It's like
all
the
the time,
Holocaust. People talk about it.
yeah,
Like,
you have
it's
Holocaust
not like
museums.
anybody's targeting any group, but it happened.
And you have Holocaust museums there. When I'd gone to Israel, when in the US as well, no one's saying we'll do another Holocaust, or
Yeah, exactly.
the perpetrators will be punished or anything. It's just history also gives that that's the space to heal, and also gives us lessons that mistakes of the past should not be recommitted. Whereas here we've been airbrushing history all through, because we somehow labor under a very, very false misapprehension that talking
That'll
about
ignite. Maybe it's too recent. You think that's why?
No.
Like the partition, maybe it's too
Yeah,
recent.
it's
Like
both,
it's
as I
still there's still people alive from that time. So you think it's too raw for them?
No, I think it is again that Nehruvian consensus, and I do understand Mr. Nehru's predicament at the time of India's
Because that time that just happened.
and that was based on communal lines. So maybe it was a fledgling nation, so let's not upset the apple cart. But today we are a mature country. We are 77 years old, a mature democracy. Even now, if you want to airbrush history and say these things, because as I said, we labor under a false misapprehension that somehow talking about truth, as much as inconvenient as it may be, will spoil social cohesion and national unity today. By doing that, I think somewhere inherently you are hyphenating today's communities with these people of the past. I keep repeating this numerous times that no person today, especially
Has any connection
yeah,
to
a young Muslim man or woman today in India is not at all responsible for what Ghazni and Ghori and Timur and Aurangzeb, Tipu Sultan, these kind of barbaric rulers did. Why should they be responsible? But the reverse is also true, where they should not hyphenate themselves with these rulers. They should not valorize them.
Exactly.
You can't have politicians, political parties, and even common people going to Aurangzeb's mazar and offering tributes.
Yeah, that's in bad taste to the to the other side.
To the other side. If I mean, how can you and I be friends if I'm actually valorizing somebody who caused grievous harm to your grandfather or great grandfather, and then say we both are friends, we have brotherhood and so on? I think brotherhood, national unity is a two-way street. One-sided relationships don't last, even in life or in the national character. So I think, and in that, history has been made a tool for that. So don't talk about these things. We openly talk about what Churchill did, the famine in Bengal, what the British atrocities are. That time, nobody says the Christians of India will get offended.
Or like we have no problems in moving to London or like traveling there. No, everybody's.
So
Also, what about popular cinema? Like we have talked about the academia. Do you think they have also failed to represent what happened?
Yes.
Do you think partition especially has been like well documented, or the time of freedom struggle has been well documented in India?
No, I think there is scope for a lot
scope
more.
for more.
Yeah, I think, and now maybe with OTT networks and so on, people can make more independent. You had a movie on Savarkar, which couldn't have been thought of maybe 35 years ago. That's another issue with the way Indian history is taught, the freedom movement. We are almost made to believe that it was a very simplistic, linear monochromatic, non-violent movement. दे दी हमें आज़ादी बिना खड़ग बिना भाल साबरमती के संत तूने कर दिया कमाल. Sorry, we were not given freedom. We snatched it from them. And from
there was violence.
There was a continuous stream of armed resistance right from 1857, which Savarkar actually called the first war. It wasn't a
mutiny, apparently. It was a big.
It was a war. I mean, he calls it the first war of Indian independence from 1857 to 1946, which we unfortunately call naval mutiny in Bombay, which should be called the last war of Indian independence, because hardly 3 weeks after that, the cabinet mission plan was sent to India to transfer power, and in a hurry they left India and went away, leaving this ravages of partition, an unfinished agenda, quite like what they did with Afghanistan. Colonial powers just exit with least care for what they do to the people left behind. So,
especially the ones who aligned with them.
Correct. And so in these almost 100-year span, the armed struggle of the revolutionary movements, and numerous characters who come in and out of that struggle, they paid with their lives. The kind of tortures and horrors they faced in Kalapani, in Port Blair. Uh, those were the things that caused the British, the tremors to leave this country. Laton ke bhoot baaton se nahi mante. So, you needed that. And almost every time span, if you see the Morley Minto reforms, the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, the Government of India Act, or final independence, they were all preceded by bloody, revolutions and revolts. Because what 1857 did to the British was it put a deep fear in their mind that if there is an insurrection in the British Indian Army, which was largely composed of Indians, there was only, I think, a small percentage, 40,000 people or something, who were Europeans. The rest of them were our people. When General Dyer ordered firing on Indians, the people who actually fired were Indian sepoys who did that. So the revolutionary movement was predicated on this premise that if we somehow try to, seduce even, say, 10%, 20% of this vast Indian army towards patriotism, then the edifice of the British Empire can fall. And that is what
they changed their tact after the 1857 thing?
The constant goal of the revolutionary movement was just that, to create an insurrection in the army. The Ghadar movement that happened, transcontinental.
No, I mean from the British.
Yes.
They changed their tactic.
So in fact, when the Congress party was founded by Alan Octavian Hume, it was called as a safety valve to ensure that there is no repeat of 1857 that ever happens. Engage the Indians a bit, give them some small, concessions, give them some position, something in the judiciary, something, and they will keep quiet. But never was it a dialogue for complete independence. Even the Congress came up with a Purna Swaraj, thing in 1930. By then, the revolutionaries had already demanded complete freedom right from the early decades of the 20th century.
By revolutionaries, you mean Bhagat Singh? And
no, much before. I mean, it started in Maharashtra and Bengal with people like Vasudev Balwant Phadke, the Chapekar brothers, and in the early 20th century.
Why couldn't they mobilize into a better movement?
Because, I mean, they tried their best. And as I said, Maharashtra and Bengal, in a time when there were no WhatsApp groups to communicate,
it's difficult.
But still there were underground movements that happened. The Abhinav Bharat which Savarkar formed, and the entire Anushilan Samiti in Bengal, people like Aurobindo Ghosh, Baren Ghosh, the Khudiram Bose, all these people who were there, the kind of interlinkages between them it's quite, we again see in history books that the revolutionary movement is a footnote in it. It is mentioned, but these were misguided young men, hot-blooded. They threw one bomb here and there, and then they got caught and they got
disturbed it.
So which is not true. They had a strategy in mind, and this played out all through. I mean, Savarkar, for the 5 years that he lived in London, those were stormy years when some of the biggest, minds sitting in London, they were engineering.
So there was strategy behind it as well. It wasn't just random.
People like Savarkar, Shyamji Krishnavarma, Madam Bhikaji Kama. We have a Bhikaji Kama place here in Delhi, but I don't know how many people know who. Is it a man, woman, what it is? We don't know. Who is Bhikaji Kama? So she was a Parsi woman who, living in Paris and London, actually mobilized the revolutionary movement. Lala Hardayal, who formed the Ghadar party. So many such names then, which are footnotes or not even known. And as I said, the Ghadar movement was a transcontinental movement, not only within India. Just imagine how could that happen, where they were communicating with Germany.
Through telegrams?
Germany, and also Canada and San Francisco and Northern America, and simultaneous insurrection in the Indian Army and Navy across, even as far as Singapore. That it failed because, this was a new experiment which was being tried. But the same thing was continued by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Rash Bihari Bose, who formed the Indian National Army. So insurrect the army, get people out, and make them fight. And the British understood this. That's why they banned Indians from having arms, the Rowlatt Act and so on, so that we were disarmed, we were emasculated, so to say, and there was no way we could fight. So these people were training in warfare surreptitiously so that they could hit the British back. So I think there is this, I'm not discrediting the nonviolent movement at all. That was one of the biggest mass movements.
Even today, like Ahimsa is as a virtue. I mean, it's people say that it's like given by the Indians to the world, the theory of Ahimsa.
I'm unsure a little about that too, because, in Hinduism at least, absolute non-violence
This
is
one
not.
cheek, the other turn the other cheek, it doesn't.
It doesn't. I mean, all our gods and goddesses are
Are
shown with
fierce.
astra shastra in their hand,
That's true.
not for non-violently allowing things
Yeah.
to do. Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, if your own relatives or teachers are on the side of adharma, then you
the
have
path
to.
of dharma has
It
to
is
be,
your duty to annihilate them. No one said just keep your arms and sit and fast, and they will all become fine. So I think the means are important, but the end is also, which is the annihilation of adharma. So if you considered the British Raj as adharmic, then it is your duty to use everything, sam, dam, dand, bhed, to ensure that that is out of the picture. So I don't know this ahimsa, whether it is really so. It's more Tolstoy, Christian, Buddhist kind of a view of what ahimsa
It's
is.
not an Indic view, you think?
I'm talking of the mass movement that Gandhi and the Congress launched. As I said, that is it spurred in Indians a desire to be free, and it brought people together like nothing before.
So what do you think Gandhi did right? Do you think his, the non-cooperation was a better movement than non-violence?
The thing is, I mean, there were three movements that he launched in the 1920. He launched the Khilafat and the non-cooperation together. The Khilafat movement probably sowed the seeds of communal partition of the country, because you were the wordplay Khilafat, you feel it is Angrezon ke khilaf, but that was actually a mobilization on communal grounds for the Muslims of India to participate in the freedom struggle in return for the establishment of the caliphate in Turkey. After the First World War. So you are asking the Muslims that you support us, in return we will help you establish a caliphate.
And you support us as in weren't the Indians themselves?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you almost make
Othering
it feel,
them.
yes, you're almost othering them yourself. If India gets free, the Muslims of India are also as beneficiaries of that.
Yeah.
But they were not participating in the freedom movement as much, especially after 1857. You had the Aligarh movement, you had Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and others who because in 1857 the Muslim community did participate wholeheartedly. They paid a very heavy price for that. So a lot of Muslim intellectuals and thinkers started saying there is no need to now go against the British government. Let's give English education to ourselves.
And when did the idea of Pakistan come?
I think right from Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's this thing that Hindus and Muslims are different nations, and the constant fear that if India becomes free and a democracy, they will be under the rule of the Hindus whom they thought they ruled for 800 years. So that thought of, how can we be ruled by someone whom we subjugated for so long? So that separatist tendencies were there right from then. And the foundation of the Muslim League was in 1906 or so, and the Lucknow Pact, which asked for separate electorates for Muslims. So all these were things in continuum. And Gandhi, unwittingly, with good intentions maybe, but to bring them into the fold, fostered this by doing the Khilafat movement. So that was the first movement, which again failed. You had the civil disobedience in the 1930s, which with the clarion call for Purna Swaraj. But that too, while it went to its peak, he brought it back with the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. And all through that movement was on the basis that we Indians need to be part of the constitutional process. The Simon Commission that came, we won't participate unless the Indians are there. But once, after doing all this protest, he turns back on that and goes to the Round Table Conference to negotiate. And even the third movement he launched was the Quit India movement, which also, I mean, it was not even called Quit India, by the way. It was called,
what is it called?
August Disturbances.
What does that mean?
It was disturbances in August, in the month of August, which was launched. And it was crushed actually within less than 3-4 months.
It sounds pretty powerful, Quit India movement.
Yeah, and in fact, Gandhi disassociates himself from the movement. So does Nehru and the entire Congress firmament. They said, we have nothing to do, because within 3 days of it being launched, or less than a week, the entire Congress leadership was put in jail. Gandhi was, of course, in the Aga Khan Palace and various other places.
I read on Twitter today about this. Was he treated very well in the palace?
In the palace, you would be expected to be in a very nice
house. So why was he incarcerated there?
It was not incarceration. It was a nice
just like keeping
house arrest.
House arrest, yeah.
So there was no plan of action for this Quit India movement. There was really, no leadership to guide the movement. And as a result, people took things into their hands. It became a bloody violent movement too, and the underground revolutionaries came out. They took advantage of this, and so when Gandhi comes out of the Aga Khan Palace, he says, "I apologize for whatever happened, and from now on, I'm not going to ask for this kind of violent movement. We'll support the British war efforts in the Second World War." So 1942 that happens, and as I said, within 3-4 months after it is actually crushed. How does one attribute 5 years later the independence to that, right? I mean, if it was snuffed out and it's very nipped in the bud, then how did it contribute? It of course galvanized all this violence, and the violence that came out then shook the British. That
more than the
my God, the army is also getting under its way. Netaji is at the border with the INA, so. What will happen to us? So those were the moving forces. And you asked what Gandhi did well. As I said, he, I think, invariably brought Indians together. A country which never thought of itself. I mean, you put 3 Indians in a room, they'll have 100 things to disagree with each other. To give them a common sense of purpose, to give them that desire for freedom. And I think he also understood that, in religion and religious symbols are very much a part of our, our psyche, our consciousness in India. So he very nicely brought out those elements. You sing bhajans, you talk about Ram Rajya and all of that. In comparison, I think Nehru was a communist. He was totally anti, religion.
And a bit anglicized.
Yeah, anglicized, and wanted a rupture from the past. But I think Gandhi understood the pulse of this country like nobody else did. I think he knew what people wanted. A person like Savarkar or Ambedkar, who were contemporaries, they were looking at a nihilist kind of attitude towards even the caste system. But Gandhi said, no, let's not break the entire caste system. He thought Varnashrama is actually a very integral part of Hinduism. And if the Varna system goes, Hinduism will collapse. He was advocating more of untouchability eradication, the Harijan movement. But overall, the caste, let it remain. And that's what Ambedkar and he always had, fights about. So he understood that in a country like this, with so much of diversity, maybe reforms need to go step by step. And not a nihilist kind of attitude will break down the entire structure and build a new one. So these were, of course, some of the good things. But when we talk to the contribution to the actual movements which led to freedom, I'm very doubtful, because if you dispassionately look at it, all the 3 movements that were launched didn't yield any tangible results.
Why deified so much then?
Well, he's become such a father figure. He's from our currency to every foreign dignitary who comes will be taken to Rajghat. I think he's become this tall, towering figure. And there's no those who throw, black ink on the sun, it's going to fall back on you. So I think India needed that very nice kind of an icon and an image to honestly brand itself post-independence.
So and the Indians did it or the British did it?
I think a bit of both. I think the way the brand Gandhi was created or embellished to what was already existing post the film by Attenborough. I think most people identified Ben Kingsley more than this. So they're also frame by frame. We have so little his contemporaries in the whole film. Someone like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar never makes an appearance in the film, whereas he had the constant ideological tussle with Gandhi. It's quite alarming that he doesn't make an appearance.
So there's no dialogue.
There's no dialogue. It's just his eulogy. And so you build up someone larger than life and also position your struggle for freedom and completely only under his leadership. So in the process, as I said, the armed struggle, the armed movement, that goes for a toss. And I think one, outcome of that, Deepthi, was also the fact that the way Indian history, we were talking about the lapses of Indian history, the complete emasculation of the Kshatriya spirit, the warrior spirit that always existed. Now, if you look at the wars we learnt about also in our school textbooks, it's like a long laundry list of battles that we as India and Indians lost. Come to think of it, Arab invasion of Sindh, the battles of Panipat, the battle of Tarain, the battle of Plassey, battle of Buxar, the Anglo-Mysore war, the Anglo-Maratha war, the Anglo-Sikh war. Everything is our battles that we lost. Now, if we
what does that do systematically to an identity?
Of course, it makes you feel like a nation of losers. Yeah. But if we are the only pre-Bronze Age era civilization which is still alive and kicking, there must have been some bravery our poor ancestors also showed.
Some resistance.
But we showed a hell lot of resistance. The Arab invasion happened in 712 with Muhammad bin Qasim. At the same time, almost the whole of the Middle East and Africa in 50, 60 years was Islamized. But to establish the first Islamic Sultanate in India after the Arab and Turkic invasions, it took 500 years. So for 500 years, our ancestors were pushing back. People like Lalitaditya Muktapida of the Karkota dynasty, Maharana Bappa Rawal of Mewad, Yashovarman of Kannauj, Rashtrakuta ruler Vikramaditya, Danti Durga, Chalukya ruler Vikramaditya, all these people and several others, they were forming alliances among each other. And that is the reason why, barring a narrow strip of Sindh, the Arabs could not conquer much. When the Turkic invasions too happened, we constantly get told that Muhammad Ghazni came so many times and he destroyed. So were everyone just sitting like sitting ducks and saying, "Come."
Kings like Akbar the Great and all, we've read about that. Yeah.
And we had the role of women in history. I mean, someone like a Rani Naiki Devi in Gujarat, whom probably nobody has heard of. She was a Chalukya Solanki ruler from Gujarat. In the Battle of Kasarhada in 1176, she manages to defeat Muhammad Ghori. And Ghori thought, okay, she's a regent queen of a young infant. So Gujarat is low-hanging fruit. I can defeat her. And he was so embarrassed and humiliated that he lost to a woman that he never turned towards Gujarat again. I mean, these are the people whom we should celebrate.
We should, and at least be like, know about
them, defy them. There should be statues of these people in every road corner, because these are the icons we can look up to, who fought for this. I mean, I don't know, nation or whatever, but at least
the region.
They kept it free from invasions. In the state I come from, Karnataka, you had 4 queens. Again, I stress a lot on history should not become his story, it should be her story too. Well, so there are 4 Ranis known as the Abbakkas, who all fought against the Portuguese. One of the Abbakka Ranis there, they using primitive local technology, a lot of coconut that was available there. So scrape that coconut, in that you put the ammunition, and in the middle of the night, these burning torpedoes thrown at a Portuguese fleet, and the entire Portuguese fleet catching fire. Yeah. So why don't we know about Abbakka? And in Kerala, which is next door.
In fact, we thought that we were a regressive nation, and like we only became progressive after these. After the British, especially, they did a lot for infrastructure.
But which is so off the mark, because the Muslim chroniclers who came along with Ghazni and Ghori and all these people, they also write about the society that existed in India. They talk about the great level of honesty and, the wealth, the prosperity, the adherence to justice. Now, they were not our, someone favorable who were coming to write eulogies for us. What they saw, they noted it down in their memoirs. So,
where can we read all this?
In several of my books. One of my books is called Brave Hearts of Bharat, which covers these 15 unsung heroes and heroines. Out of these 15, I've ensured 7 are women.
And these should be made compulsory in schools. I don't know what happened to the new education policy. Are we changing any aspects of history to have a more comprehensive narrative?
Right question to the wrong person, because I have nothing to do with the government or they don't want my advice.
Do you think it should be done?
Of course it should be done. I think a lot needs to be changed. It's happening too slow for anyone's comfort. And the problem is, I think in the 10, 11 years, you've lost 2-3 generations already, because I think most children study history only up to class 10.
That's true.
You're waiting to get rid of it because of the rote learning that you have. So in those foundational years, if these seeds are not sown, then I don't know when they will be. And I must emphasize that these are not something I'm talking of jingoistically, that, Mera Bharat Mahan, everything about the past is great. There was a grand golden age and then villains came and I'm not at all saying that. But there are elements of the past for which we can have genuine pride for what our ancestors did, whether it was valor, whether it was also our immense achievements in various fields, in sciences, in chemistry, alchemy, Ayurveda, yoga, mind-body understanding, architecture. Those things,
which are actually things like now with AI coming in, I think that's the biggest gift you can give to the new generation. Is just alignment, because everything would be knowledge would be so accessible, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to remember everything, but you need to know how to analyze.
Yes, I think that on that I would credit the government that there's lots of work being done on the Indian knowledge systems, IKS and so on, which is being introduced. But it should be done more. It should be done in an interesting manner. I mean, children want things to be told to them in a nice way.
Maybe there are not enough teachers to
You have to train
access system that way.
train the trainers.
Yeah.
So that is the first step. First create the content, then train the people
Yeah.
who can tell these as nice stories.
Yeah.
And we are a nation of storytellers. We loved
oral
Racanter.
tradition,
We are an oral tradition.
Yeah.
Look at the way our epics have been. I mean, one theme of Ram and Krishna and the Mahabharata or the Ramayana. Every part of India contributes in creating the story.
Yeah.
There are so many versions of the Ramayana. There's so many, in Hindi someone writes, Tulsidas writes something, then centuries later someone else does something. Kamban writes in Tamil, Pampa in Kannada, and so many additions to the same story.
Yeah.
So where did we lose this knack of interesting storytelling, which is what, I mean, as children, we would sit with our dadi or nani and actually sit and listen to their stories of this king ruled here, there, and all these stories. I mean, you can't do that in a university setup. There has to be some academic discipline, I understand. But an element of interest, an element of genuine
and a two-way
pride.
dialogue for learning,
A genuine pride. And also, I think history, as I said, offers that space to heal the wounds of the past, make peace with it and move on. And also learn what mistakes we committed so that we don't repeat
that's the primary motive.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we say, is history a tool for nation building as the Nehruvian construct thought? And to do that nation building, are you going to gloss over uncomfortable truths, brush them under the carpet and think that it will never come up? But truth has a very inconvenient way of showing up. And when it does, these wounds which are festering inside and not healed, they will explode and blow up in your face. And the social schisms we see today, it's a manifestation of that very thing. Just one example, I mean, Bakhtiyar Khilji, when he attacks Nalanda, Vikramshila, Takshashila, these were our Oxfords, Princetons, Harvards, where people from all over the world would come there to study. At Nalanda, you had the Mahavihara, where it was the largest residential university. Chinese pilgrims, Fahian and all, Hyun Sang, all these people come there. So many people are living there. Hindus and Buddhists.
How do they all learn? Like, what is the language of learning with so many?
Varied. I mean, Pali, Prakrit, Sanskrit, which were common. Bakhtiyar goes there and attacks it and burns it down. And it takes 6 months, they say, for the entire thing to burn out. That amount of knowledge and manuscripts. And
it's been lost forever.
It's been lost forever. Today, if you go to the Nalanda ruins and you come out, the name of the place is Bakhtiyarpur. Now, which country in the whole world will actually valorize the person who has destroyed your greatest universities? Isn't that such a travesty with truth?
In that.
Huh?
It destroys generations
of learning, most of them, and the knowledge, as I said, 6
irreversible,
months. Yeah, it can. What all might have been there. Some of it was taken away by the Tibetans, and it is there in various Tibetan monasteries and libraries. But so much else could have been lost. But as I say, our historical amnesia and this false pretense,
and indifference,
that we actually hero worship someone who did a heinous crime like this. So Aurangzeb Road here or whatever, it was there in Delhi.
Some of it is being changed now.
Yeah, but just changing of name is one starting point.
Yeah.
Disseminating knowledge as to why that is necessary to change and
it should be followed. Yeah.
That should be researched and made people to understand. I think that is important.
If you were to time travel back to any particular event, what holds your imagination, like where would you like to go and what would you like to see, witness?
Oh my God. Several. Probably first to the Ashokan era. I'm very curious to know why Buddhism, which originated in India, there are various theories that does that. And as part of the FIHCR, we are actually investigating that. Why did Buddhism disappear from the place of its birth?
Moved to the eastern...
to Sri Lanka, to China and the
Japan,
Southeast Asia and other places. The various Theravada schools, all of that came. But why did it die out in India? What were the reasons for that? The usual Marxist trope is, Brahminism killed Buddhism. But I don't know if that is completely...
Or Buddhism came as a response to Vedic, corruption in Hinduism.
Which is also, discounted. The corruption in the Sangha, in the monastery, what happened? Did it become too elitist? Did it actually, separate itself from the common people, the laity? The clergy was so separate. And it started talking, on intellectual lines, which was too difficult and dense for a common person to understand. Was there really any persecution? As per the primary sources, again, they talk about Pushyamitra Shunga and others who persecuted the Buddhists. So this would be such an interesting thing, which we're actually doing as part of the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research in association with the Nalanda University. So that would be something I'd really want to time travel over a long time and see what happened.
Okay, just one word for each of these people.
Okay.
Gandhi,
Complicated.
Nehru,
Anglophile.
Savarkar,
Patriot.
Sardar Patel,
Iron Man.
Bhagat Singh,
Braveheart.
Bose,
The first Prime Minister of India. More than one word, but
okay. Ambedkar.
champion of social reform.
Thank you, Vikram. Thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you,
And
Dipti.
I hope we covered everything. I know it's such a vast subject.
Indian
We'll
history.
probably need more episodes with you.
We meet probably 10, 12 episodes on every aspect of Indian history.
I know. And congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you very soon again.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dipti. Thanks.
If you like this episode, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Statesman. Thank you for watching.